Welcome back, viewers. You are still tuned in to Prime Live. This week has been a rather turbulent week in South African politics, with just 2 days before the crucial first sitting of Parliament slate for Friday. If anyone's guess if a deal from the Government of National Unity has been struck between the ANC and other parties, what we do know is that if an agreement is not reached, the first sitting will not be able to elect a president, a deputy president, or a speaker of parliament in that matter. But that will also leave us with the option of heading back to the polls. Now, will South African political parties be able to put aside their differences and cobble together a government of national unity? To help us really answer these questions and many other pressing questions that I know all of you might have, I'm joined by Senior Research Fellow at the University of Johannesburg Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership. We are joined by Dr. Oscar van Heerden. Good evening, Doctor, and welcome to INX Prime.
Good evening, Nazia. Good evening to your viewers.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation this evening. I know that a lot of our viewers are looking forward to this conversation to answer a lot of these burning questions that they have. And South Africans are generally in the dark regarding how the GNU talks are progressing at the moment. But let's actually start our conversation by tackling the urgent business of Parliament's first sitting. Is it at risk of not convening at this stage if the MK party gets its way, or will it not succeed?
No, I don't think that the MK party is going to succeed with the interdict for a number of reasons. The fundamental basis of the interdict by MK is the fact that they disagree with the results from the IEC. Now, that is a matter that MK should have dealt with before the IEC actually formally announced the results. The fact that they failed to do that and bring an interdict against the IEC doesn't now mean that concomitant you then blame Parliament. Parliament is taking their cue from the official results that was announced by the Independent Electoral Commission. Seat allocations have been done as per the rules, and so Parliament is continuing with its business, and it will sit on Friday. I would find it very strange if the Constitutional Court is going to grant an interdict to MK because of a dispute of the results, because that's ultimately what MK is implying, that there was somehow massive vote rigging and that the results as we know it is not a true reflection. That is something that you will have to resolve with the IEC and in the Electoral Court. So I think the Constitutional Court is going to say that's the first thing. The second thing, if indeed this was urgent, you should have done it just after the announcement of the official results. Why wait 2-3 days before the sitting of Parliament and now you want to bring an interdict? So I think for all those reasons, MK's interdict application is going to be unsuccessful. Parliament is going to have its first sitting. And I think that the Secretary of Parliament, Kolile George, has clarified the issue of coration. There is no issue about corating. There are 400 seats. The MK has 58 of those seats. Whether they come or they don't come, it is neither here nor there. The President and the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly is elected through a simple majority. And if other parties want to object and have a notion of no confidence, that then brings us to your scenario, Nazia, which is that failure to constitute government will mean we'll have to return to the polls.
Thank you for clarifying. I think that will put a lot of viewers at rest, because there is a lot of tension and turbulence across South Africa of, the fear of the unknown, especially with this constitutional court idea. A lot of people were feeling very anxious and very nervous about the whole idea. But political posturing aside, would you say that South Africans are looking forward to getting on with their lives and having a little bit more peace and understanding as to what is going to happen in the future? And people have been very patient up until this point, but do you think that we can rest easy that things are going to be okay?
I do think so, Nazia. The thing is that the fact that no political party received an outright majority simply means that our democracy is maturing. People are spreading their options. They are saying that they want to vote for other parties. And what that means is that we are now, if you like, in the realm of normality. This is the kind of politics that happens in Europe and elsewhere in the world all the time, where, there's no outright majority. You have to negotiate, you have to compromise, you have to cajole and lobby for your positions, including the budget of the government. But I don't think that South Africans should fear this moment. I think that it's simply a moment where we are looking at our political party leaders across the political divide and saying, we want to see whether you can step up, whether you can be mature. Yes, you might have and hold very strong views in terms of policy choices, but since you are now in the process of negotiations, give and take, you give some, you take some, you can't have it all. And I think the time, Nazia, I think it's important to say that when there was a dominant one party, such as the African National Congress, it was actually quite convenient for everyone to just blame the ANC for everything. But now we have to spread the pie, and some, portfolios will have to go to the DA and to the EFF and possibly the PA and the IFP, and they will have to stand responsible for that. If you look, for example, at previous experiences such as Patricia de Lille from the Good Party, Smangaliso, who was the Minister of Science and Technology from Azapo, they had to take responsibility for those portfolios. And so if you put a Julius Malema and you make him Minister of Police, he needs to then demonstrate to us that he's going to get a handle over crime. And he can't blame the ANC for that. So this is a good development in our democracy.
I like the perspective that you've shared, and it definitely brings a sense of relief and a bit more, positivity to the mix, especially with all the negativity we're seeing and all the hysteria we're seeing from people not knowing what to expect from the future. But I think you're correct in saying that we've had it very easy in the past, where we've always had a majority and we knew what the outcome was going to be, and that necessarily is not a bad thing that we're not having that at the moment, and that it is healthy for our democracy for all these different people to come together and then take accountability in their respective portfolios. But for the interest of our conversation today, let us actually just contemplate that very worst case scenario on Friday.
Yeah, look, the ANC was very clever and very strategic when it said it wanted to form a government of national unity. It's not something that is provided for in our constitution. It's just a terminology. What it actually is saying is that we want a broad multi-party coalition government. Now, if parties cannot demonstrate the requisite leadership and maturity to compromise on their positions and form this government, they can't agree on who should be the president, who should be the speaker. They can't agree on fundamental policy differences such as the national health insurance or black economic empowerment or nationalizing of all mines. If parties are intransigent on these levels, then the president, unfortunately, is guided by the constitution and will then have to inform the nation that, look, we tried. We tried within the 14 days. We negotiated very hard. We compromised. But unfortunately, we could not come to an agreement. And as such, I am declaring that we cannot form government. And I'm setting a new date after consultation with the IEC as well as the chief, the Chief Justice. A new date has been set, and new elections will take place within 6 months from now. That's not a situation that any parties want, perhaps with the exception of MK.
Absolutely. And I think for voters as well, and South Africans in general, it doesn't seem like an ideal situation. Now, this is all hypothetical conversation that we're having, but it's good for us and healthy for us to have these kinds of conversations to, yes, also discuss the different possibilities that might happen, and then also alert South Africans and viewers at home, to the various possibilities that could happen, and also might put their minds at rest when it comes to the unwavering stress and anxiety about the unknown future of our country. Now, let's continue on this hypothetical path. Now, should the ANC go back, should all our parties go back to a voting, and we go and we have a voting day again, we all vote again, we know that the ANC's votes have dropped drastically since the very last election. Now, this is all conversation that's been going on social media. A lot of people are under the impression that should we go back to vote again, that the ANC's votes may drop even further. Do you think that this would happen?
Yes, that's a very real possibility. I want to dispel this notion, if ever there is the notion that it would be in the interest of the ANC to have a rerun of the elections. In fact, it would be a very serious risk the ANC is taking, because there might very well be many millions of voters that say, well, actually, I didn't go out to vote. I see there's an alternative in the form of MK. Let me go to the polls and let me give Zuma the mandate to actually run the country again, because of this warped notion that things were better under Zuma. And that might be very detrimental to the governing party. At the same time, since we are in the realm of speculation, 11 million people stayed away from the polls. They didn't feel they want to come and vote. Perhaps the coming week, the last few weeks have been a shock to their system. They've seen what it means in terms of uncertainty, and how you can now compromise the struggle for transformation and development. And they might come to the polls in their numbers and decide to vote for the ANC and give the ANC that overwhelming majority. We know that the DA has peaked in terms of its support. This is a fact. But the unknowns is indeed MK. So a rerun doesn't in any way mean that we are going to have certainty. We might go in the opposite direction.
If anything, it would further exacerbate the uncertainty that already exists in South Africa. And I mean, regarding the 11 million people, as you shared with us just now, that didn't go to the polls to go and vote on voting day. I mean, it comes to question, was the country not uncertain enough already for, people to be able to exercise that right to vote? But speculation is rife, and our conversation is, yes, based on speculation, but also important. Which parties or portfolios do you think that each party will be getting in the government of national unity? I'm very interested to know, what are some of your predictions when it comes to the government of national unity and how they'll function together in terms of allocating these different portfolios?
Yeah, Nazia, I don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but I just want to make one point about voting. I think it's important that we do spread a message that says that even our voting patterns are normalizing in terms of comparatively to the world. It's very rare anywhere in the world for such high numbers of registered voters to come out and vote. So I think we need to start getting used to the idea that even though there are 31 million registered voters, which is almost half the population, the fact that 16 million participated and actually voted is still very, very good. In most countries, in most democracies, in the US and in Europe and so forth, they long for the day when such numbers of people actually come out to vote. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you're really putting me on the spot here, because speculations are rife in terms of, firstly, the president can constitute his cabinet as he pleases. Now, what that means is he can shrink the number, he can enlarge the number, he can even decide that there can now be 2 deputy presidents. It doesn't require a constitutional clause. So I think that's very important. And the fact that there's talk of a government of national unity, one of the bargaining chips the ANC might want to use as the majority party is to create an additional deputy president position. And say to the DA or the IFP or even the EFF, come on board and we will offer you a vice president position with the following responsibilities and so on and so forth. So that's the first thing. And there has been speculation in the media about Heerden possibly being a deputy president. I don't know if that is true. I doubt, because I think I know the ANC to the extent that if anything should happen to the president, it means a white man is going to become the president, acting president of the republic. I think that's a stretch of the imagination too far for many in the ANC. So I don't think that is going to happen. There's also been talk of the IFP president being a deputy president. And that might very well be the case, simply because if you have a big opposition party like the DA with 22%, if you want to sort of taper their impact and their influence, it's not a bad idea to actually give a very senior position to the IFP, to sort of counterbalance that. And then, of course, there is, and I think there is some real credibility in the argument that the DA want to be the Speaker of the National Assembly. And I say that because I penned an article, Nazia, a few weeks ago, in which I actually said that the ideal situation would be to give the executive branch to the ANC and to give the legislative branch to the DA and some of the other opposition parties. In that way, they still fulfill their function as opposition parties. They keep the government in check. They exercise oversight, but not in a draconian way that stifles the day-to-day running of government, of course. And in that way, they can be partners in actually running the state. So I do think that there's a big possibility that the DA would want to be the Speaker, or at the very least, a Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Now, when it comes to portfolios, cabinet positions, the ANC, if we look at their history, they tend to field individuals in positions that is very close to their heart. So they will take a candidate from COSATU. And because that individual deals with trade unions and protests and so forth, they'll make that person the Minister of Labour. In other words, deal with your own people. You know how they operate and how they function and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't be surprised, if a similar template is going to be used by the ANC. We know that the DA is very concerned with the economic and finance cluster. And so they might be offered a position of Minister for Trade and Industry and perhaps Deputy Minister of Finance, to give them some sentiment that they are in control of some of the levers when it comes to the financial situation in the country. Julius might, issues that are close to his heart as the EFF is issues of nationalization, issues of land expropriation without compensation, and so on. So I wouldn't be surprised if a portfolio in that vein is perhaps assigned to him. Or, surprisingly, we might see a Julius being the Minister of Police, taking over from Becky Cele, who has lost his parliamentary seat. And I'm merely spitballing here. The PA, we might say that since they feel very passionate about immigration and so forth, we might give them a Minister of Home Affairs, or at the very least Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, and so on and so forth. So I think that's how the ANC is going to try and play this game. But there are obviously, Nazia, key portfolios that the ANC is going to fight very hard for. One of it is obviously the president. They would want Cyril to continue. Justice, the military, foreign affairs, and COCTA. Those are the key ministries. They might also throw public works in the direction of the PA or the EFF. Deal with our public institutions, whereas public enterprises, I wouldn't be surprised if the ANC is going to try and say, you know what, DA, you've been so worried about our state of SOEs, why don't you take a stab at it?
No, I think in an ideal world, that would be a perfect match. And I love that you've shared that with us this evening and given us, an overall idea of the types of considerations that would be taking place in terms of where to place which party and where to place which individual so that they may all play to their best strengths. And like you said, in your very positive outlook on the government of national unity, it may not be such a bad idea to put people in positions where they are most passionate about, or put people in portfolios which they feel very strongly about. It may, be able to foster a stronger democracy. But on that topic of a positive perspective, a lot of people are not as confident about this idea of a coalition because we've seen that on a provincial level, and it proved to be quite turbulent when we're bringing two different parties together, combining their different philosophies, their different ways of leadership, and their different visions for what South Africa or what a province should be looking like. A lot of people are nervous about the idea of a government of national unity. Now, are you confident that this government of national unity, consisting of all these different parties, all these divergent philosophies, all these different types of leadership that they would like to inflict, the different views they have on what South Africa should look like, do you feel that it could actually work?
Nazia, this is a Ramaphosa moment. If ever people understood the personality of Cyril Ramaphosa, the reconciliator, the negotiator, this is a moment, this is his Mandela moment. And I think he wants to step up to the plate. He wants to make this work. This is, after all, what the electorate wants. This is the position they've put the country in. And so I think that, this is a moment where he feels he can demonstrate leadership. When you are in cabinet, and I think it's very important to make this point, with all Julius Malema's bravado and shenanigans and so forth, when you are in cabinet, you take on a different persona. You need to be responsible, and your boss is the president, as per the Constitution. And you need to afford that forum, the decorum and the respect. So when you're on a party political platform, by all means, criticize, attack, etc. But when you are inside the house, you are now in a cabinet meeting, you take on a very different persona. And I think that is why I feel that the EFF, they are presented with a moment here in history. Julius and Shivambu and others, they know that this is the closest they're going to get to occupying cabinet posts, to actually be part of running the country in various portfolios. And by doing so, as I said before, Patricia de Lille, Smangaliso, and many others, Kortbroek, even from the New Nationalist Party, right at the beginning, they all had to step up to the plate. Tony Leon will tell you, as a former leader of the DA, when the President Mbeki requested that he please go and represent us as ambassador to Argentina, there you don't play party politics. You don't play oppositional politics. You are now a representative of your government, and you need to fulfill that role and afford it the respect. So I think that our political leaders are all mature, and if they decide to take on that function, even a Gayton McKenzie, he will know that he needs to conduct himself in a particular manner as a minister of government. And I do think that a number of our political party leaders are going to step up to the plate.
Thank you so much, Dr. van Heerden, for joining us this evening, for sharing your insight, your expertise, as well as your information with us this evening. I think we're all feeling a bit more settled about the uncertainty that does lie ahead of South Africa and how this very situation or this very scenario can be actually very healthy for South Africa's democracy. But we thank you for your time and for sharing us with us this evening.
Pleasure.
Viewers at home, that was Dr. van Heerden from the University of Johannesburg. We had an insightful conversation with a lot of information about what the possibilities could be looking at the future of South Africa. Now, Dr. van Heerden definitely provided a much more positive outlook on the possibility of a government of national unity.